Imagine this. You are walking down the street, minding your own business, when suddenly a guy runs up, snatches your brand new smartphone right out of your hands, and sprints away. What is your immediate reaction? You probably yell for help, and then you immediately try to find a way to call the police. Within minutes, a car with flashing red and blue lights shows up. You file a report, maybe check some security cameras, and the justice system takes over. But what if this exact same thing happened thousands of years ago? What if someone stole your favorite hunting spear? Or worse, murdered your brother in the year 1000 BC? There was no 911. There were no detectives in trench coats. There were no flashing blue lights, no prisons, and absolutely no police. So how on earth did human beings survive? Did everyone just do whatever they wanted in a lawless, chaotic free-for-all? The short answer is no. In fact, ancient justice was far more strict, terrifying, and brutal than anything we have today. We're going to explore exactly how ancient people handled arguments, thieves, murderers, and women's rights, and how humanity finally evolved into the modern police system. First, we have to bust a massive myth. A lot of people think that without police, ancient humans lived in a state of absolute freedom, where the strongest person just made the rules. That is completely wrong. You didn't have a professional police force watching you, but you had something much, much worse: your neighbors. For the vast majority of human history, people lived in small tribes, farming villages, or tight-knit communities. Everyone knew everyone. If you broke the rules, started a fight, or stole some grain, you didn't have to worry about a cop arresting you. You had to worry about the entire village turning against you. In the ancient world, your survival depended 100% on your community. If the village decided they didn't like you, they wouldn't send you to a cozy jail cell with 3 meals a day. They would exile you. Being kicked out of your village in the ancient wild was basically a slow, terrifying death sentence. You would either starve, freeze, or become a snack for a wild animal. Because the threat of exile was so terrifying, peer pressure and community gossip were the original police force. But what happens when gossip isn't enough? What happens when someone actually commits a serious crime, like murder? Without a state prosecutor to handle the case, justice was entirely a family business. If someone from a rival family killed your brother, it was up to you and your relatives to get revenge. You were the police, the judge, and the executioner. This system was called the blood feud, and it was a complete disaster. If you killed the guy who killed your brother, then his family would come and kill you, and then your cousins would go kill their cousins. Entire generations of families would just endlessly wipe each other out over an argument that started decades ago. Ancient societies quickly realized that everyone was going to die if this didn't stop. So they invented a new system: blood money. The Vikings called it Wergild, which literally translates to man price. Under this system, every single person in society had a specific price tag on their life. If you murdered someone, the only way to stop their family from hunting you down was to pay the massive fine. You literally had to hand over cows, gold, or silver to the victim's family to balance the scales. If you couldn't afford the fine, you were officially declared an outlaw, meaning anyone in the world had the legal right to kill you on sight. Okay, so you can pay off a murder. But what about thieves? Handling property crime in the ancient world was incredibly tricky. Today, if someone steals, we put them in a timeout box called prison for a few years. But ancient villages did not have the time, the money, or the extra food to build a prison and feed a criminal. Punishments had to be cheap, immediate, and permanent. If you were caught stealing in a medieval town, you would be dragged to the town square and locked into the stocks, heavy wooden boards that trapped your head and hands. You would sit there for days while the entire town laughed at you, spat on you, and threw rotten vegetables at your face. It was ultimate public humiliation. But if you stole something valuable, the punishment got much darker. Ancient justice loved permanent physical marks. If you stole livestock, a blacksmith might brand your face or your hand with a red-hot iron. In many ancient empires, they would simply chop off your hand. The logic was brutal but effective. If you had a missing hand or a burned face, every single person in the village instantly knew you were a thief, and nobody would ever trust you again. Now, when we talk about ancient law and justice, we have to talk about how incredibly different the rules were depending on who you were, especially if you were a woman. If you look at the oldest written laws in human history, like the Code of Hammurabi from ancient Babylon or the laws of ancient Rome, the legal context for women was incredibly harsh. Modern justice treats everyone as an individual citizen. Ancient justice often treated women as the legal property of their fathers or husbands. If a man attacked another man's wife in ancient times, the law often didn't view it as a crime against the woman herself. It viewed it as property damage against the husband. Women were expected to maintain the honor of the family at all times. If a woman broke a social rule, argued publicly, or was accused of being unfaithful, she didn't get a fair trial with a jury. The male head of the household was legally allowed to be the ultimate judge, and punishments for women were severely strict to ensure the family's reputation wasn't ruined. So let's talk about the courtroom. If two people were arguing over a stolen cow and there was no CCTV footage, how did they figure out who was lying? You would drag your neighbor in front of the local decision makers. This was usually a council of village elders, a local warlord, or a tribal chief. They didn't have law degrees, they just had all the power. But what if it was a total mystery? What if there were zero witnesses? Ancient people believed that if humans couldn't figure out the truth, the gods would. This led to one of the craziest justice systems in history, the trial by ordeal. If you were accused of a crime and denied it, the elders would force you to undergo a physical test of torture. One popular method was the ordeal of hot iron. The priest would heat a heavy piece of metal in a roaring fire until it was glowing red. You had to pick it up with your bare hands and carry it for 9 feet. Then they would bandage your severely burned hands for 3 days. When they unbandaged your hands, if the burns were healing nicely, it meant God was protecting you and you were innocent. But if the burns were infected and rotting, guilty. Another favorite was the ordeal of water. They would tie you to a rope and throw you into a freezing river. Water was considered a pure element. If you sank to the bottom, the pure water had accepted you, meaning you were innocent. They would quickly pull you up before you drowned. But if you floated, the water had rejected your sinful soul, and you were declared guilty. For thousands of years, this terrifying mix of blood money, missing hands, and boiling water was the only justice humanity knew. So how did we finally get to police officers in squad cars? The change happened because the old system completely broke down. As the centuries passed, villages turned into massive, overcrowded cities. The old neighbors watching neighbors system works great when there are 100 people in a village. It completely fails when there are 1 million strangers living in London. During the Middle Ages, the English tried a system called the hue and cry. If you were robbed in the street, you legally had to start screaming. Everyone who heard you was legally required to drop their tools, grab a stick, and chase the criminal with you. If you didn't help chase the thief, you could be fined. As cities grew larger, they tried the night watch. Towns would pay a few tired, elderly men to walk around at night with a lantern, looking out for fires and breaking up bar fights. But they were completely useless against organized gangs. Then came the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. Millions of people flooded into cities, poverty skyrocketed, and crime absolutely exploded. The chaotic mob justice of the ancient world was no longer working. Finally, in 1829, a politician named Sir Robert Peel decided enough was enough. He established the Metropolitan Police Force in London. These men were given dark blue uniforms, wooden clubs, and a regular salary. They were nicknamed Bobbies after Robert Peel. This was a massive shift in human history. For the first time ever, the goal of justice wasn't to brutally punish a crime after it happened by chopping off a hand or starting a blood feud. The goal of the new police force was to patrol the streets and prevent the crime from happening in the first place. And that system spread across the entire globe, evolving into the complex network of police, detectives, and judges we have today. We traded a world of blood money, public stocks, and glowing hot iron for a world of speeding tickets, lawyers, and locked prison cells. The modern justice system is far from perfect, and it is definitely complicated. But looking back at the terrifying reality of ancient survival, It is safe to say that getting a parking ticket is a massive upgrade from being thrown into a freezing river by your neighbors. So next time you see those flashing red and blue lights in your rearview mirror, just take a deep breath, pull over, and be extremely thankful you don't have to carry a piece of red-hot iron to fight your ticket.